Welcome everybody to session 4 of the Shelter and Love series. So just for those of you who are joining for the very first time, if you don't have any background, my name is Jay Chodagam. I'm an engineer turned into a meditation teacher based here in San Francisco Bay Area. And this is a series that you all requested. I was supposed to be in Japan right now doing a retreat, and everything, as you know, has got canceled, and we're sitting at home quarantined. And some friends reached out and said, why don't you start something where we can have a support system online? And I did a series last 15 days, which ended last week. And then they said, no, that's not enough. We are still in quarantine. And I said, okay, let me do another series, which is going to be different, where the focus is not about me, but it's about all these amazing people who have been a great influence in my life. And I wanted to share my friends with you all. So here we have one of those significant personalities that influenced my journey. This guy who you're seeing on the screen is a tremendous resource for the world. And he has written a number of books, and some of you might have read his books, 7 Myths of Love, 7 Ahas of Highly Enlightened Souls, Don't Get Mad, Get Wise, etc. So I want to welcome Mike George, my friend from the UK. Hi, Mike.
Hi there.
Such a pleasure to have you here. So a little bit of the story. So I've been reading Mike's work, and I never got to really know him until an opportunity lended itself where we were both at a retreat place in a town called Mount Abu in India. And we were heading out of Mount Abu back to our respective countries, Mike to the UK and me to the US. And we happened to get in the same taxi from Mount Abu to Ahmedabad, which is a 4-hour taxi ride, which was one of the most powerful journeys I've had, both physically and metaphorically, sitting and chatting with Mike about everything and anything. And that's when I think we really got to know each other. We became good friends, and we've since collaborated on a few different things, not as much as I would have liked, but anyway, here we are. So Mike, I'm going to start this off with this very fundamental question, which is, there is the obvious thing. There's a pandemic, there's a global lockdown in place. And what I want to hear from you is, underneath the surface of what is the obvious symptoms, what's really going on that we need to see?
Well, aside from all the conspiracy theories that are washing around the internet, as you're probably well aware, I think it all comes back to that well-known phrase, which we've heard over the years. In fact, it's been shouted many times over the years, stop the world, I want to get off. And of course, that's a cry in response to the busyness that we found ourselves increasingly exponentially involved in terms of work and play and all areas of our lives. And suddenly we have the fulfillment of our desire. The world has stopped, and it's an opportunity to get off. So I think many people are enjoying a really good break, a really good holiday, as they are free. But of course, that has obviously meant that many others have had to intensify their workload, people in government, people in the health system, etc. So they've gone to the other extreme. But the vast majority of people certainly are taking time out to do what they've probably wanted to do in their heart for all along, but find it difficult, but also find it difficult right now to be on their own, to be alone, to be isolated socially, as we say. So I don't know. I think it's throwing up a lot of issues in a short space of time, not least the one that we haven't been prepared for this particular event. And we're beginning to see that now as to why we haven't been prepared. And yet at the same time, people are much kinder to each other. There's much more unity out there. The world's a much quieter place. And so it's like a very mixed bag of energies that are flying around, both globally and personally.
Yes, absolutely agree that this is that time that we've always wanted, and we have the gift of that. And this, as you said, this many positive things, but I just want to call something out that is up front and center right now, at least in the United States. We have one particular city where the capital of the state of Michigan, and people are out on the streets protesting that they want to get back to work, and they say enough of this lockdown, lock her up. Lock her being, in this case, the governor of Michigan happens to be a lady, and she happens to be from the Democratic Party. And so people are out with Confederate flags. I don't know if you have an idea what Confederate flags are.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you have that. So it is shocking to see that whilst the message that you are saying, and I think this, that, which I've been hearing from other speakers and other deep thinkers, is that this is the time for us to come together. There is these forces that are going out and actually making this as a reason to make this world more divisive. And especially it is so contextually relevant. We are getting ready to go into an election season very soon here in America. So this has become a political ploy, if you will, to further divide and conquer us. Would you comment on that?
Well, I think it's pretty inevitable that you're going to get a mixed bunch of energies around the country and around the world, but mostly in America because of the divisiveness that's taking place on a political level. And you've just got people identifying with their own political agendas. So there's bound to be some kind of conflict, and this is just one of the ways that it's coming to the surface. But ultimately, it's just a symbol of people being divided within themselves, and then they're looking for support from other people, and they don't want to obey the martial laws, if you like, probably to some extent because they're picking up information from so many different sources now, especially online, which all have different agendas and different ways of presenting the current situation, and actually encouraging people to be divisive, to revolt, to get into conflict. So you've got all these energies around, and so people are very easily led by the media, by technology. That's been the agenda for 50 odd years, to influence people through the media, through technology. And so you're just now basically seeing that's coming to a head, that's coming to the surface. And people are revolting. Yeah.
So here is my question then. So if this was a wake-up call from the universe, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, right? Really, it's a coming full circle of how we have used and abused resources, whether it's within ourselves, within a community, and Mother Nature. If this was a call for us to slow down, realize, and that isn't happening as we are seeing right now, if anything, it's just becoming another political agenda item. What would it take for us to eventually, we need to, so my thing is that we need to work hard and fast to protect our resources. We need to work hard and fast to heal ourselves. And if this global thing shutdown isn't doing it, what will? And so there's two parts to it, right? So one is that, will anything be able to wake us up? And if we don't wake us up, can you offer some insight on what life is going to look like?
It's not going to wake us up because it's coming from a place of force. And so if you look at the whole shutdown, the whole thing has been forced. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just a reality, is that we've been forced to do what we're doing. And the human consciousness has become so dependent on the secondary reality, which is the reality outside, the reality around us, which we have been taught to believe is the primary reality, that when something goes wrong, something changes, something we can't control out there, that really means we start to create a deeper sense of insecurity within ourselves. And that's what we see conflict is. It's just an expression of individual insecurity. It's fear coming through in behavior. So The wake-up call has to come from inside out, not outside in. Yeah, it has to come from the individual, not from government, not from a forced set of circumstances, not from something that's taking place outside. So what we're watching now, ultimately, is just another step, another part of the process of entropy. And entropy is from a personal point of view, is a downward spiral into chaos. So for me, the way I see it, and I don't see it negatively or positively, I just see it as it is, it's just another expression of greater chaos in a world that's already chaotic. And that's going to increase even faster and even further now because of this situation.
Wow. Very hopeful.
Yeah, but hope's a disease, you see. You can't talk about hope in this context, because if you sit and hope for something, then that means you're dependent on someone else, and you're still asleep. You're not awakening from inside out. You're not waking yourself up to what's really going on. And what's really going on is just the expression of the material paradigm. Our values have become material. As a globe, we've pursued material aims and goals and purposes. And so the chaos and the energy of the world is the chaos in the material paradigm. And that's been inevitable, is inevitable. It's not going to get any less. We have to go through it in a sense.
Right. So for those of us who are sort of kind of cracking open our eyes and kind of pretending or feeling like we're waking up, so would you offer us some tools to deal with this, the fear pandemic? How do we, one is, there's the progression, right? So there is the inner growth and the strengthening of ourselves, but which is also constantly being influenced by the negativity outside, right? So would you offer some insights into how does one, A, keep progressing, B, stop being influenced that is preventing my ability to move inwards and upwards and onwards?
For me personally, and there'll be various views on this, I'm sure, but the only way through is to understand yourself as consciousness itself. And when you understand yourself as consciousness, then if I could use the metaphor of the cinema, then you begin to look and watch what's going on around you outside as if you're sitting in a cinema. So you're just watching a movie. That sounds easy, it sounds clever, but it's not so easy because we don't understand ourselves as observers. We don't see ourselves as observers. We're quick to outrage, we're quick to blame, we're quick to criticize, we're quick to project outwards onto what we see happening in the world. And if you think about it, when you go to see a movie and you sit in the movie theater, you don't project and criticize and blame and get upset. Well, you do actually at the movie, but the movie is not real. You can sit there and you can watch the movie and you can be quite calm and quite peaceful and quite easy. And so it's necessary to understand who I am and my relationship with the world outside, my relationship with the world around me. It's just a movie that's taking place. And that's not an easy idea until you realize who you are as the conscious being, as the being of consciousness, whose natural state is in the title of this particular seminar, is loving, is kind, is generous, is peaceful. And so it's until you come from that state of being within yourself, until you can look at the world and the violence and the craziness, until you can look at the world as if it's just a movie playing itself out from that inner space, then it will always disturb you. It will always have the effect on you of seeming to make you upset, seeming to make you angry, seeming to make you fearful. But it's not. There's a lovely old aphorism. One of my favorite aphorisms is, it's not what you say or do to me that makes me feel this way. It's what I do with what you say or do to me that makes me feel this way. And so this is the area of what's called self-responsibility, personal responsibility for my own thoughts and my own feelings. And that's what they don't teach us at school. In fact, they don't want to teach us that. They want us to go to the movie and be affected by what's on the screen, be influenced by what's happening on the screen, be influenced by what's going on within the characters that we're watching. And so we never really discover our own power. We never really discover our own nature. We never really discover who we are, who I am as a human being. And so therefore I'm always enslaved to what's going on around me, always. And that's a challenge for us all.
Very true. And I'll add one more dimension to that challenge, especially in these times, which is people are finding themselves in really close quarters with so-called their loved ones, or sometimes maybe not truly loved ones, but they're forced to be in quarters because of the dwelling situation. And then relationship issues are at an all-time high. And you've done a number of amazing books. You put out lots of amazing pieces of wisdom there about handling relationships. And, I understand what you're saying, that, one needs to, come from a place of love, but sometimes these things are challenging, especially to ramp up this new sense of awareness, right? Really about, it's not what you just said. It's not about what you're doing to me, but what I take what you're doing to me and make of it, right? So would you give us some tips on, in the midst of this pressure cooker, if I can call it that, what are some things that, to mitigate relationships going awry, what are some things that we can, handle relationship issues, just to put it simply?
I've been doing quite a few seminars on how to be alone but not be lonely, and of course in that process I've kind of identified 4 kinds of people on a spectrum, and you can see which one you fall into as a listener. Is that down at one end of the spectrum is the person who's kind of monkish, and they've said, I don't want to be a part of the world. I don't want to be in relationship. I want to be on my own. I want to live like a monk. So they've got a very deep resistance to other people, whether it's been from childhood experience, etc. It doesn't matter. And just a bit further up the spectrum, there's the individual who's cool and self-contained. And they're quite cool. They're quite easy. They can be on their own in any circumstances, but they're also quite easy when people are around. So they're quite cool and self-contained. They're quite loving towards people, and it doesn't matter who it is, they're easy. Then you come up the spectrum and you get the yo-yo, the person who's, I've got to get away from people. I can't stand these people. There's just so much energy. They're sucking my energy. And as soon as they go to be alone, it's not long before I've got to be with people. I've got to interact. I'm a social being. Therefore, it's right that I go and mix with people. So they're kind of yo-yoing backwards and forwards. And then right up the other end of the spectrum is the AD, the addicted and dependent. And they're needy all the time. They want stimulation all the time. They want to be around people, or they want to be stimulated by others, whether it's face-to-face or through their screens, television, phone, or whatever. And so you have this kind of spectrum of people. And most people, I think, are up this end in the addiction and dependent. And so therefore, to be alone, to be self-isolated is very challenging for them. And the addicted and dependent, they're essentially needy. And so they're needing something from outside to make them feel secure on the inside. Whereas down here, you already have discovered your inner security. And the deepest sense of security for any human being is love. And we know this because when we're kind, when we're generous, when we're outward towards others without wanting anything in return, when we're just kind because it's our nature, that's love in action. And so be kind if you want to feel secure in yourself. It's like a paradox to the opposite of the material paradigm that we've learned. Go get what you can and hold on to it and don't let anyone else get it. Whereas when you're kind, and that's what we're seeing now, is we're seeing a lot more kindness, people are finding their own sense of security on the inside. So the only piece of advice I would give to to everyone across the spectrum, and it's already being practiced with the cool and the self-contained, is just to accept everyone as they are, to accept every circumstance as it is, to accept sounds easy, because acceptance is love in action, but it's not easy, because we've got the habits of judgment, of worry, of criticism. We've got all these habits ingrained in our consciousness, because that's what we've been taught. That's how we've been taught to think, by the media, by the screens, by the material paradigm. So to just accept people as they are, as they come, as they appear, is very challenging for us. And that's why meditation becomes a little bit essential, because the purpose of meditation is the cultivation of self-awareness. And it's only when you deepen your level of self-awareness that you tap into the energy, the power that allows you to express your acceptance of others, that allows you not to have your buttons pressed and move into reactive mode, that allows you to feel kindness for others and not feel emotionally upset by the presence of others. It's only in meditation, the deepening of one's consciousness, that you can tap into that inner power, which is already there in every single one of us.
Which is a perfect segue. Would you lead us into our personal power and a sense of security, please?
Sure. So the purpose of meditation, the simplest definition, is this idea of the cultivation of self-awareness. But it's not just something that you do. It's not just something that you put on your to-do list. Meditation, or the awareness of what's going on within you, is something you're doing almost all the time. It's just that when you sit on your cushion or on your chair to meditate, you're going to deliberately go inside and see what's going on inside. And that takes you to what's called self-understanding. You begin to understand, you start to, over time, why you think the way you think, why you feel the way you feel. That will then take you deeper into something called self-responsibility. And you'll realize, this is the big one, the big penny dropper, is that I'm responsible for every thought and feeling, every action, every behavior in my life. I'm the creator. That sounds easy in theory, but everything in our life up until this point has taught us the opposite. Someone else is responsible for what I feel, for what I think. So this is the idea of self-responsibility. Now, once you combine self-understanding and self-responsibility together, then you'll begin, it takes a little bit of time to cultivate what's called self-mastery. And then you become the master of your feelings. In other words, you throw out the anger, you throw out the sadness, the habit of making yourself fearful begins to atrophy, and you begin to ground yourself on the inside in your true nature, which is loving, which is peaceful, which is contented. And then finally, there's something called self-realization. It's the realization that this is my nature, this is who I am. You know, when we stand on the ground outside, we stand on very solid ground because it's a physical world and I've got physical feet. But here I'm going into my consciousness, which is the universe of spirituality, and the ground there is not solid. There is no ground, and the no ground is our true ground. Sometimes the mystics call it silence or stillness or just being. And so once you've practiced your meditation over time, you'll begin to taste that solidity. It's like a solidity in consciousness. It sounds like a strange paradox, but that's what will take place. So I'll share a few thoughts as we go into our meditation. It's very simple. I try not to talk too much. And if people are watching this, I would recommend you don't watch the screen, but you look to one side, because otherwise you'll just start watching my face and that just triggers judgments and evaluations. But find a place next to the screen, beyond the screen that you're watching, rest your eyes, and then I'll just share what I'm doing in my meditation out loud. Very simple. So just relax your body in the chair. Step one is always just to relax the energy, the physical energies of your form. And then bring your awareness and your attention. Just bring it away from the world around you, back to your breath, and just follow your breath for a moment. so that you follow the whole movement of your breathing, the whole cycle. Don't force it, just watching, just observing. And as you do, you become even more relaxed. And then bring your awareness to yourself. And see if you can be aware of yourself being aware. And then just consciously create one thought in your mind. I am a being of peace. Allow that thought to move across your mind very slowly. And then let that thought fade away, fade into the background. And notice what remains. There's a feeling of peace, of calm, a quietness within your being. And now the mind is silent. And there's a stillness. Here at the heart of your being. Silent and still. Silent and still. Then bring your awareness back. Back to the room around you. But bring that stillness with you. So as you look through these eyes, see from that stillness. As you listen through these ears, hear from that stillness. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Wow. I feel so much more centered and relaxed right now. Thank you, Mike, for that. So I invite our audience who have joined in through Zoom to please formulate their questions. And there's a Q&A tab there that you see at the bottom. And if you could please post your questions there, then I will read them out to Mike and Mike will respond. So Mike, while they are putting their thoughts together and typing up things, I just want to ask you a question that has been, something that you've been talking about a lot, which is happiness is not excitement. And happiness is something that is experienced when you feel a sense of alignment with who you are, with what you're creating and sharing with the world. And that for that, the important ingredients is that you are being creative and knowing your truth about who you are and what you are. So that is so powerful because none of our education systems talk about this, such an important thing about what actually drives our being, which is, we're in the pursuit of happiness. But what is happiness? Could you talk about a little bit about things that will help me to find my own gift? So when you talk about creativity, when you talk about sharing things, it's not obvious to everybody. So can you help us to figure that out?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize in a sense, the illusions that we've been taught. And the main illusion is that pleasure equals happiness. And so we've grown up associating the only form of happiness being some kind of pleasure. And pleasure always comes from outside in, from some kind of stimulation. And so that's what's made us dependent on other people, on the world, on the circumstances around us. So you have to kind of clearly see that. And that then combined with a regular methodology, technique, process of going within, meditation is one, and realizing your ability to be content within yourself anyway, without the need for any external stimulation. And the process of arriving at that ability, arriving at that realization, arriving at that understanding, it just kind of takes time. It takes time for most people. The theory is easy, but then putting into practice is obviously is challenging, because we're demanded to act and interact in the world. And according to our conditioning, and our conditioning says the world makes me happy, or the world makes me unhappy, people make me happy, that conditioning is there. And it just takes time for that conditioning to atrophy, if you like, within our consciousness. And that's why you find most spiritual practitioners, the practitioners of things like meditation, will say it's a process. When you've arrived, it's not. There was no process. It feels as if it's instant, but between here and there, there is a process. Just one final thing is that when you know your true nature, your original nature, whatever you want to call it, is already contented, doesn't need anything from the outside to be contented. When you know that, you're not thinking that, you're not saying that, you just know it, and it just exudes in everything that you say and what you do. But you're not thinking, oh, now I'm really happy, I'm much happier than before. You just are residing in your true and original natural self. You're there. Yeah.
Well, the next question is interesting, considering what you just said. You talked about, the journey of myself. The question is, how do I get someone who's averse to meditation into meditation?
You don't. Don't try. If you're trying to do that, then you're trying to force them again. And so you're attempting to succumb to the most popular illusion in the world, which is that other people can be controlled. And you can't. You have to just literally move into that space yourself. And then when you move into that space, then there's the possibility it will pull them with you. In other words, don't try and control people, but always remember that you can influence people. That's why very often I will say is, please do not believe a word I say. See for yourself, be for yourself, wake up yourself, and don't be impressed by anyone else in that sense. And so if you've got someone around you who doesn't want to sit in meditation, then go to another room, leave them alone. Let them be. Acceptance again. Acceptance.
Right. Fantastic. So Luz Elena is asking, give us one tool to face chaos.
There's a nice idea I came across a long time ago. There's this idea that chaos is only chaos to a person who's not yet learned to perceive order. So chaos is only chaos to someone who has not yet learned to perceive the order. And so the chaos that people want you to see are really projecting onto you their inability to perceive the order. And they want you to share, isn't this terrible? Isn't it awful? Isn't this so bad? Oh, my, what are we going to do? And so the challenge is, how do I see the order in whatever is going on? And that brings us full cycle to that idea of can you sit in the cinema and notice that you're just watching a movie, you're just watching people. Some people are getting very stressed, some people are getting very upset, some people are getting very cool and calm. It just, everyone's reacting, responding differently. So you're just watching people, characters in a movie, and each one is just playing out their different roles, if you like. Can you sit and watch? And as soon as you practice watching like that, then what will occur in your own consciousness through your own perception will be aha, now I see what's really going on. Now I see, aha, that's connected to that, and now I can see, and now I understand that. And you'll begin to see your version, of course there'll be your version in your own way, of actually, it'll make sense. It'll start to make sense. Now, people can help you to make sense. There's lots of information around. And what many people are tapping into is the information that's available on the internet, on YouTube, and so on. So in a sense, they're overstimulating themselves with too much information. So they're using the information and they're confusing themselves. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's got the right idea? Who's got the right perception? Who's seeing it the right way? And so as you listen and absorb all these sources, all these rivers of information, you're just drowning. So that's why you have to go and sit quietly in a corner and just go, hey, wait a minute. I'm not seeing what's going on out there from the deepest place within myself. So the deeper you become within yourself, the clearer and the easier it will be to deal with, to perceive what's going on around you. And that's why I'd always full cycle again, come back to some kind of practice, whether it's introversion, reflection, meditation, find a quiet corner. This is the time to do it and get to know yourself. Know yourself. Know thyself, as they used to say in ancient Greece.
Very, very true. I've seen that so true in my life. If there's one thing that I've gotten from meditation is the practice has made it obvious, something that's always been there, right there in front of me, and I just never saw it.
Couldn't see it, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So Melissa's asking a question. So do you think that if not now, will we humans as a whole ever wake up to who we really are, or it will only be on an individual basis?
Uh, it depends what you mean by waking up. I mean, if you mean waking up, becoming more aware, then I think collectively we'll become more aware. But on an individual basis, some people are going to have to go through tremendous suffering to get there. You know, that's why most people don't really start to wake up until they hit their brick wall. And the brick wall, the dark night of the soul, or intensive stress, or what have you, is what stops you in your tracks to reflect and question. You know, are these the accurate values that I'm living by? Do I have the right purpose to my life? Do I really know who I am? And so you begin to notice there's gaps, and they're not accurate, and the answers to those questions are not clear. And so everyone arrives at that point in a different way, at a different time, for different reasons, for different triggers, etc. So it's both collective and individual. Because what we're seeing now is that you know, the world is a very small place. We're very interconnected, and there is a collective. There is a collective awareness at a certain level, and that awareness that things are not going well, our relationship with the world itself is not accurate. That's been rising in the past decade with climate chaos, etc. And so there is a moment when we're all going to go, wait a minute, this is not right. And that's already happened for many individuals. So it's both individual and collective. It's not one or the other. But in terms of truly waking up to who we really are, there's probably going to be many people, I don't know, I would imagine, who will not wake up fully at all. In other words, they will not really truly discover who they are, what they are on the inside. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling a little bit in the dark there. It's a little bit like I was saying earlier on, you know, the old souls are the ones who wake up first, you know, the old consciousness. And now we have to get into territory like, well, what's a young soul? What's a new soul? And I don't want to get into all of that. But the old soul is the individual who what's going on? This world is so shallow and superficial and material, and I don't get it. I don't understand. There's no meaning. There's no purpose. And so they're really kind of agitated inside, and so they hit their dark night of the soul quite fast in this lifetime because everything's very intense and speeded up. Whereas the new soul who arrives, this is heaven. Give me my telephone. Where's my screen, my TV, my drone, and all the clever toys? Where are my clever toys so I can have fun? It's fantastic. Oh no, there's no suffering in the world. I'm just having fun. And so they're not aware that something is not quite right. So you've got this factor as well, the old and the new, and then every shade of gray in the middle, you know. And so, I don't know, collectively, individually, who knows?
So I know you answered this question, but you know, so Melissa's question begs this other second part, which is because of these people who are playing with their toys and will continue to play with their toys till the end, or if there's an end, or I don't know, till the waking up. The question is, do we all need to pay for that? You know, or I know you said something around there is no paying, there's no, you know, you have to basically wake up and see this is part of the flow. I know you used other words. I'm paraphrasing here, but what is the woken up or partly awake, let's just say, what is their, what do they have to do while the rest of the people are taking their time, or if at all they wake up?
Yeah, you can't, and I understand the question. It's just, it's a question towards a very, very big context. So again, let's use the metaphor of the movie. And in the movie, there's always a hero, or there's a few heroes, and they're the ones who help the rest of the characters in the movie to see the accurate way to live. You know, not the right or the wrong, just the accurate way, the right way. Well, okay, I've used the word right. I try not to use right and wrong because there's no polarity in consciousness. There's just the accurate way, which is aligned to your true nature, or it's not aligned. So you, in the movie, you see that there are characters there, and sometimes they're not the main characters, they're a secondary character, or they're standing in the background, or they just have a fleeting moment of visibility in the story. And so I think that's what's happening here, is that the real leaders in the world are not visible. They're incognito. The world right now is struggling with this issue of leadership. The leaders in government are struggling to cope, to deal with, to lead people through this particular situation. And that's not surprising, because it's been building up for a long time, and it's a material situation. They're not able to come from a deeper spiritual place. And so I think the real leaders in the story, the movie of the world, if you like, are going to be the ones who emerge, who can show others how to deal with what's going on accurately. And they won't announce themselves. They'll be there. People will point. They'll be recognized, and there they are, and they're living the right way. They're saying the accurate things. They're being accurate in the context of their relationships, and so they're going to be the ones who, if you like, come to the surface of the story at some stage, and who knows when that is. Who knows?
That's going to be very interesting, because part of coming onto the stage requires a certain thick skin.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is, not only will they be, I'm assuming what you're saying is that they're going to have political power, that they will be seen on the stage, and then they'll have spiritual power to demonstrate how to lead life. And that at this moment, as you have pointed out in some of the examples, they seem to be completely diametric opposite ends of the spectrum of any one being's capabilities.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting what you shared. So, okay, I'm going to go to the next question. Maki says, why do people go to India to find peace within when it is already within?
Mythology. The spirituality that existed in India has spilled over into the rest of the world. You're just looking at the old becoming new, and these cultures, the Indians, the Chinese, and so on, they're older cultures, they're older countries. They were populated and inhabited first. And when they were populated and inhabited first, they lived a more natural life. They were more naturally spiritual. But they weren't sort of going around saying, well, this is spirituality and that's not spirituality. They just were naturally living an authentic, integrated, and accurate life. And then along comes religion, and religion hijacks spirituality and tries to institutionalize it. And that's what's happened in India. But in the meantime, the spirituality, the ideas, the concepts, and so on, that's spilled in. It's traveled as the occupation of the population has traveled further west, further north, and so on. And so you've found these ideas seeping through. They've always been there in those cultures. But of course, those cultures, being newer cultures with newer souls, have tended to be more materialistic, generally speaking. And so as the materialism of those cultures has caused greater and greater suffering, as it must do, then people look to those strands of Eastern understanding and grasp onto those strands as relief from the suffering. And so then those strands get accentuated by a few souls, first of all, by communities, by gatherings, by groups. And eventually, this is what you're beginning to see, the original principles, the original idea, the original understanding of who I am, what I'm here to do, which was there right at the very beginning, not in an intellectual sense, but in a real sense, that's now seeping through the material paradigm of the Western world, because the material paradigm is not working. And so they look for Eastern ideas to try and counteract, relieve the suffering from that. And that's why you see a resurgence of Eastern spirituality in the Western world.
Beautiful. I love
Simple
that.
terms.
Yeah, I love that. So in the East, religion hijacked it. In the West, materialism hijacked it. Now people are looking everywhere for ways
Thank you.
to find even
That's a much better summary.
Oh, it's brilliant. I love that. Yeah. So we got a couple more questions. One is from Johanna. She says, especially for a new meditator, is it best to meditate by yourself or with a group such as what we're doing today?
When you're starting out, it's best to have a group or a teacher or someone who will guide you that you can meditate with to begin with. But then, after time, it's something that you're going to do on your own. You're going to be able to not be dependent, for example, on a commentary or someone doing a commentary, but being able to take yourself into that state of consciousness for yourself. But in the beginning, yeah, for sure, find a teacher. There's many ways into meditation, and Dr. Google is there to help. So use Dr. Google, and in your local community, find a teacher or a group or whatever, and join, and so that it gets you started. It's like a starter pack. Then after a while, you'll be okay on your own.
Great. And then hopefully this is the last question. Jenny's asking, when you do best to maintain relationship as per your capabilities, but the other being negative keeps on abusing, how do you keep motivating yourself?
Oh, okay. So I imagine that there's a partner which someone's not happy with, or there's maybe even violence in the relationship. If there is physical violence, then leave the room. Leave the house, first of all. If they're abusing me physically, then leave. And of course, that's easier again said than done, because many people, they subconsciously misconstrue the abuse as a form of attention, therefore a form of love. And so they may have been abused as a child. So it gets very, very complicated. If it's emotional abuse and mental abuse, then the secret there is that they're abusing you. In other words, they know how to make you suffer. They know how to make you react and go into a state of suffering. So it's like they subconsciously or consciously, they have power over you, and they kind of know that. So they want to exercise that power. So it's necessary for you to find your own power and to respond differently. And if you want to heal a relationship, if the relationship's gone bad because of abuse or neediness or dependency on one side, then the secret is to but this does take power, and this is why meditation becomes essential, is to give respect to that person. Even though they're being violent towards you, can you respond with respect? That means you might have to leave the room or leave the house occasionally, but can you leave with respect? And what helps you to do that is that if someone's being abused and being abusive, then they're being violent. And if they're being violent, that means that they're violating, first of all, their own consciousness. There's a violation going on inside themselves. And their abuse towards you is their expression of that. Their violence towards you is their expression of that. So if you understand that the violation is primarily towards themselves, then that helps you, maybe, and depending on the situation, move from condemnation. You're always abusing me, which is me abusing them. It helps you move from condemnation into compassion. So then you've found the title of the seminar, The Shelter, and the shelter is love, because compassion is love in action. So can you be compassionate towards the abuser? What might help you to get to that space is always to remember that don't take it personally. They're not abusing you. They're abusing their version of you. So they're not abusing you. If it's a mental emotional thing, if it's a physical thing, it's different. But if it's mental emotional, they're abusing their version of you. In other words, it's how they've created you in their consciousness. And so everyone creates their own version of everyone else. That's one of the principles of life. It's like when you go to a movie, and you go for coffee afterwards with your friend and you say, well, I didn't see that in the movie. And then they say, well, I didn't see that in the movie. Were we watching the same movie? Of course we were, but we created our own version of the characters. And so the abuser has created a version of you, and they've decided, I don't like them. It's not them they don't like, it's the version they've created that they don't like. So can you understand, if you can understand that, that means they're being violent towards themselves, essentially. They're creating violence towards the image they have of you, not you personally. So this might help you to not take it personally. It might help you, it might not, but that's the basic principle. So I don't know if that kind of helps. If that maybe helps a little bit. I don't know. But,
No, there's a lot to unpack.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a course in itself. It's a retreat in itself right there.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you for giving us some tips on how to, another way to perceive it and not get attached to, not taking on the image that is being projected upon you. I think that's,
Exactly.
I think essentially what you're saying. So I'd like to thank you for your time. We've gone over time. Thank you for all for staying. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your time generously with us. So the way that I'd like to summarize it, I think every which way we went with my questions, with questions from the audience, there's only one thing: you got to meditate. you got to take time to go to the deepest part of yourself. There's simply no other way. And whether you're an old soul, new soul, please do it, because we all have to rise to the occasion, and we all have to, make this life a better place as well, a better place to live in. So thank you so much, Mike. Thank you all for joining. I will see you all tomorrow. So a quick plug for my guest tomorrow, Rhonda McGee. She's a professor of law at the University of San Francisco and a social justice advocate, recently come out with a book. She's been helping a lot of lawyers deal with the stress that that they face in their professions. A good friend of mine lives right here in San Francisco. So we'll see you all on the same channel tomorrow. Until then, be well.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.